Good evening, all. I'm Dustin, also known as Rope Aficionado, and welcome to the Dominance Dialogues. This is a podcast where we explore the psychology, the sociology, and the cultural aspects of BDSM. From intentional relationships to deeper conversations, this is your space for thought provoking discussions that challenge and inspire, whether you're experienced or just curious. In tonight's episode, we have Orpheus Black, and our topic is sacred power, the intersection of spirituality and BDSM. Do you mind introducing yourself and a little bit about your experience and your journey?
Mm, Thank you. Thank you. My name is Orpheus Black, and I've been in the lifestyle for about 25 years as a professional dominant. I came into the kink sphere through polyamory. I actually had a partner who, after dumping us, right, dumping me and my partner, came back and said, "Hey, I got to introduce you to this world." And she introduced us to the pro performance lifestyle. We walked in, saw the craziest things, just kind of crazy out there. Uh, and the thing that was most interesting to me is that it wasn't weird to me,
Hmm.
right? It's like I thought to myself, I could do that, right? And so I met the person who would become my mentor, and my mentor started me on this path. And since then, I've shot for pretty much everybody from HBO, Showtime, Kink.com, Dungeon Core, you name it, I've been on it. I've been on Oprah Winfrey's network. I've been all over the place, basically preaching the gospel of using conscious kink as a method of transformation, right?
I
That's me.
love that phrase.
Good,
I like it.
good. So I think for me, just to kind of jump in there, what we often do within the framework of kink is over intellectualize a process that doesn't need to be over intellectualized. In doing this exercise of who's got the bigger brain, we actually lose the meaning in the frameworks with which we are trying to explore and experience. I'll give you an example. A lot of people are looking for the spiritual narrative, but really what we're doing is a spirit ritual. Right? We're doing rituals that engage the parts of the person that are no longer tangible, the parts of the person that is inside that's driving the vehicle. We're looking for the passenger, the person who's looking to have a subtle experience, right? We often access that portion of the psyche, if you want to call it that, or the soul, if you want to call it that, through the body, right? And for me, that's a big thing. If we make it just just basically about animalistic passion or pleasure, which is fun, don't get me wrong, that's great. But the primal itself accesses the body. That's what it means. It's the biological urge narrative to reproduce, to release pressure in the body. But when we create spirit rituals, it's to access something deeper, something more meaningful, right? Something that's borderlining on transcendent. So that's why I like to help people explore.
Great, great introduction. Great start to this topic.
Thank you.
Thank you. So to just dive further, let's talk more about your journey. How did you first discover the connection between spirituality and BDSM? You talked about how you were brought into the BDSM through the poly community, but where did spirituality come into play?
Thank you for that. Two places. One, I was raised Baptist, right? And I wanted to be the guy at the front. I wanted to be a preacher. I wanted to be the person on the pulpit, give me an amen, and the congregation would respond, amen. And I'd say, this is for the people, and wow, and everybody would interact with you in that way, call and response, right? I want to command the audience, and the audience obey. And that came from a divine authority. So it would be a three-way relationship, right? You automatically recognize that by the power invested in me, right? I get to give you this, and you have to obey by this power invested in me. And I think you can see that when the sub consents by the power vested in me, she invests her power, right? And now there's a certain level of obedience that needs to happen because she recognizes the own power being reflected back at her.
Wow. That that was profound. I really, really appreciate all of that in so many ways. We talk about like the power exchange, and I think how you framed it, and at least how I interpreted it, is a submissive kind of powers a dominant, and then that power is reflected back towards them. You know, it's the polarities of dominance and submission. They feed each other to some aspects.
Or I can serve as a mirror with which her own power is reflected back at her.
Mm.
Right? Like Wonder Woman, get those bullets, pew, pew, you know, bounce right back off of the gauntlets, right? Because again, we have to realize that I need a sub to be in power in order for them to negotiate, in order for them to sit down and sign a contract, in order for them to speak to their desire. They have to have power. And they authorize me to explore and to expand. So basically, I'm just a reflection of the power that they've already invested in me. Right? And they recognize what I like to call the divinity in themselves by me reflecting it back at them. I help them see who they truly are. I help them see the power that they're capable of. I help them see through reflection their truest self. Right? Now, I'll give you an example. I had a sub and we were having some problems. I kept saying, you're doing this, and they couldn't see it. And I kept saying, you're doing this, you couldn't see it. So here's the shadow or the inverse of this. I take them in the bathroom. And I said, tell me what you can see. And they say, I can see my eyes, I can see my face. I said, can you see the back of your head? I said, no. I said, you have to understand that there's parts of you that I can see that you can't. You have to trust in me. You have to understand that I have your best interest in mind. I'm going to help you see the parts that are hard for you to see. I'm going to show you those narratives. And if it feels good to you, we'll start this method of transformation. If it's something that you want to change, we'll start praising you and loving you for it if it's something you want to keep. And if it's something we need to get rid of, we'll go through a process of relegating this and extracting this from your psyche. At the end of the day, I'm just a mirror. What are your thoughts?
I need to digest a lot of that. I mean, it sounds like it's to me, it really does sound like you've incorporated spirituality into your personal relationships to a very,
Absolutely.
very deep level. I thought I was fairly spiritual when it came to what I do, but I suppose I have a lot to learn from this episode. With that, um, I appreciate the term mirror, the reflection. In my own dynamic, I speak that my girl is an extension of me, an extension of my will. She is a reflection of me, right? I always thought about it from this side. Who offered me new perspective. It's still in line with my flavor of authority. It's just a different perspective. Now I imagine the joys of what I get out of this podcast is to sit back and reflect on the conversations that had, the thoughts that were spurred. And now I can sit back and look at something that I've used inside of my own relationships for some time, but from a different side, right? I've always looked at it from my side. I've never really looked at it from her side, that while I look at her as a reflection of me, part of that is her reflected off of me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a that plays Chicago, right? There is a segment where the I think it's Roxy comes out and she explains the three-way relationship, or the dual relationship she has with the audience. She says, "I love them, and they love me, and I love them for loving me, and we love each other, and that's because neither one of us got enough love when we were children." You know what I mean? But she explores that dynamic because it can't be just the audience loving me. It can't be just me loving them. We have to love each other in this mutual reflection. They serve as an audience for the star serves as an audience for them, and they have to recognize the reciprocity that's happening between the two, right? We need to see people who serve as a reflection of our deepest desires, but as well as our shadows. We need people who are going to call us on our shit. We need people who are going to say you're screwing up. We need people who are going to do it. And sometimes they're the same person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's where a big thing for me is I need people around me that have a voice, no matter what role they are, right? Because like you said, there's sometimes I don't see stuff. And
Right.
sometimes I might not hold myself accountable because I didn't see it, right? I
Mm-hmm.
didn't see that I wasn't doing as much work here as I should have, or I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
giving this person as much quality time as I normally did.
Mm-hmm.
So, so forth.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's really hard oftentimes because they're not because they're two-way mirrors. Right? I can see them and they can see themselves reflected back, but I can't see myself in them sometimes. And that's where the disconnect happened. And we see that in the very opening of the Four Agreements in that book. He said, you know, the shaman came down because he could see himself reflected in the entire world, but when he stood there, they couldn't see themselves reflected in him. And there was a loneliness in that he was each and every person, he was everything, but no one saw him in the same way. We each have to act as a mirror, as a reflection for each other, and that actually keeps us in a very healthy place. That's why the term Ubuntu, I am because we are, I am, if I am sick, we are sick. If I am healthy, we are healthy. It's the process of each person seeing themselves as a reflection for the other. We can't do this alone. We can't do this in isolation. And one of the number one things that I wind up coaching with dominants is this idea that they often feel like they're an island. They can be amongst a whole bunch of people, but sometimes they wind up feeling alone amongst a crowd of people because they don't see themselves reflected back. Thoughts or feelings? Love to hear from you.
I'd like to know what kind of advice you offer to those dominants that feel like they're on an island. Because as someone that's been in the BDSM, as a BDSM practitioner for close to 20 years, I felt on that island before, even though I have community, and I'm very thankful that I have family in the BDSM world, in my opinion. And
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
there's still moments where I do feel alone, and I personally, I think for me, it's a me thing, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
an imposter syndrome moment, a moment of I think imposter syndrome probably just sums it up most concisely of feeling that I don't belong where I am.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, here's the thing: if you conceive of something, your whole psyche will structure it in a way that it works for you. If you see yourself as alone, your mind will create a psychosis or create a thing, a paradigm in your mind that reinforces what you're already experiencing, which the imposter syndrome or the XYZ. If you're feeling lonely,
Mm.
it's going to try and explain why you feel lonely, right? But here's the thing: you do you train your subs?
Of course.
Okay. Have you trained them to take care of you when you can't take care of yourself?
That's a tall burden, but yes, actually, I what the specific and the easiest one is they're responsible for me eating because I
Mhm,
work and I forget to eat. I forget to take care of
mhm.
myself often. I forget to, my sleep schedule gets off, so on and so forth.
So what's the protocol when you're on that island?
There isn't one yet, I suppose.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm.
You have to teach people how to love you.
That's powerful. Hmm.
You know, that's it. And it's not easy to ask for. It's not easy to do. But if you don't teach people the proper way to love you, then they have a 50-50 chance of failing you. When I can just say, hey, here's what I need. Here's just come look for me. That was my thing. When I suffered from depression, I used to have chronic depression, and and I would just sleep for days. And I just had to tell my partner, just look for me. Come look for me. Because the thought in my mind was nobody cares, nobody looks for me. Nobody wants to find me. If I wasn't around, it wouldn't change anything. And then so my behavior reinforced, created a self-fulfilling process. So I was hiding in my room underneath the covers, hoping that somebody would do something I never asked them to do. Right. And so I had to say, come find me, look for me, knock on the door, open the door, pull back the covers, just make sure I'm okay. And eventually, with that and some medication, it went away.
Yeah, I uh, I definitely know I still have some some healing. I don't ever personally think I'll ever be healed. For me as an individual, I think it's a constant journey. Um, and one of the things that I was just thinking about this, and I think some of those moments when I feel like I'm on an island,
Mm-hmm.
I'm fairly confident that I uh, exhibit behavior that further makes me on that island. And part of that is I feel like, I'm on an island, so I'm just going to be on the island and screw everybody else, maybe mentality. I don't know. This is all just off the cuff right here. And I
Right.
think what I want is what you said. I need to teach somebody to love me. And in that moment, I want someone to say and grab me and shake me and say, hey, I'm on this island with you, buddy.
Yep.
I'm,
Exactly.
I'm the beach, what was it, the volleyball or whatever on that Castaway movie, right?
Yeah. Exactly. You
Mm.
know, and but the thing is, and this is the key part, and this is what's hard to remember is, do you know that you're worth it?
Ooh. Are you asking me or is that
Yeah.
rhetorical?
I'm asking you.
That's something, to be honest, I've really struggled with. Knowing my value goes back to the imposter syndrome. For various reasons, I've wondered why I'm here.
Mhm,
It's getting better. It's getting much better.
mhm.
I know my value not only to myself but to those around me. I'm very thankful that I have people around me that I didn't have to necessarily teach them how to love me, but they already knew what they needed to do and kind of support me through my
Intuitive.
and exactly. And now I really need to think about that because like I said, I know there's moments, and there was a moment not that long ago, just probably about a week ago, where I was really on that island just screaming.
Hmm.
Um, and it ended up working out, right? I don't want to get too personal, but
Hmm.
nonetheless, it was a moment of growth. And I think I need to sit back and really think about, like, how do I want people to love me?
Right.
And
Exactly.
really to dive just really just deep and get hit by every wheel on the bus, how do I want to love myself if I'm really, really thinking about it?
Exactly.
And I
And
think
what
that's
you're
where
saying too, I'm sorry, what you're also saying too, and let's not get ahead of it because this is really important. The share that you're not saying is that I want to be loved.
Mm.
I want to be loved by other people. I want to love myself. And there's struggles in both areas. And now I know that there's a role that I play in helping people do that.
It's easier to help others than help myself.
Absolutely. That's why we signed up for this.
Absolutely. Wow.
Absolutely.
So many thoughts already. But I want to keep on track. So my next question to get back to the topic would be, which not to diminish what this just was, because this was a moment for me, right? And I hope the listeners appreciated it, but seriously, this was a moment for me that I really need to think through. But back to the topic, are there particular spiritual or cultural traditions that resonate with your approach to BDSM? If
Mhm.
so, how do they influence your life or your dynamics?
Thank you. Well, like I say, I was raised Baptist, and but my grandfather was a Buddhist,
Mhm.
and so I was kind of raised in both traditions, and so I mean I've was read the Bible all the time, as a child, and so there's themes in there that I've incorporated into my relationship. While I'm not a Christian, I still have, like, always do what's in the best interest of the family. Or the 11th commandment, this I give unto you, love each other as I have loved you.
Mhm.
Right? Those are things that are philosophically profound and sink deep into the psyche of the people who you're engaging with. Um, give you an example. I had two subs one night, and we went out, and they didn't know each other. And I asked one to get some water for the other, and they're like, "I don't know her. Why would I do this, that, and the other?" And I'm like, I pulled her to the side. I said, "So you'll clean my floggers, you'll clean my paddle, you'll clean up all the other things, but you won't take care of my other toy.
Mm.
Why?" Right? It's like, if this, I want you to love each other as I have loved you. I love you in front of her in this way so that she learns how she's supposed to love you. I love you in front of her so that she can understand how to love you. So in the event that I'm not here and it's just you, you understand how to take care of this person, my things, just as I've taught you how to take care of my other things, my floggers, my paddles, my rope. Right? And so Christianity heavily influenced that narrative to be able to try and help people explore the dimensionality of intimacy. Right? So that's one place. Um, Zen Buddhism, I'm huge on Dogen, love Dogen and Suzuki. Uh, their influence on me really helped me better understand trauma uh, as it pertains to spiritual versus individual. And that has helped me immensely. I'm pretty much a Zen person in practice all the time. And again, to give you an example, um, to have a crisis of faith is different than have a breach of trust, right? If I steal your money, you don't trust me. If you have a crisis of faith, you don't trust people like me. This is why people say I don't trust men, or I don't trust women, or I don't, because they've had a crisis of faith. And healing one is different than how you heal the other. But if we don't recognize that there's a difference between the two, we'll use the same kind of tropes to try and help a person through this thing, or to try even save our relationships, not realizing the nuance associated with it. And so Zen really helped me understand and really analyze the language that I'm using to be able to produce these outcomes.
I like that difference, that crisis of faith, I believe is how you phrased it.
Mm-hmm.
another good thought for me to just marinate on and think about. Wow, I like it.
Thank
Hmm.
you. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
So, from your perspective, like, how do you help differentiate? As far, well, not maybe not. Let me rephrase that. I don't really. I'm not looking at how you differentiate, but you said your approach to how you heal it, I believe was your phrase, is different. What is the differences there?
Well, if it's a breach of trust, me and that individual can sit down and have a conversation. What did I do that breached the agreement that we created? Right? If you are angry at me as a representative of my gender, that's another thing. We need to have learn how to have a healthy interaction with the masculine as opposed to me as a man. Right? And so that goes back into socio-political uh, narratives that are very hard to deal with. Right? I have a client right now that's, in this kind of I hate all men, and then speaks to me about it and forgetting that I'm a man. And in the process, she says mean and hurtful things. Right? And while I realize that she's having a crisis of faith, the person who actually did it is receiving none of this heat.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So this guy caused this crisis of faith, and now we all have to deal with it while he is living his best life. Mm. And one of the things I'll say to her, I say, don't treat me the way he treated you because we don't deserve it. Right? It's a really simple process. Don't treat me the way he treated you because we don't deserve it. You didn't deserve it when he did it to you. And I don't deserve to catch all the anger, hate, pain, and animosity that you're harboring because of what was done to you. Camus said, healing happens when you know what to do with what has been done to you. Right? So for me, understanding that she doesn't have a place to put this shame, this pain, this anxiety, this animosity, that's huge. Right? It's up to me or someone into her life to help her find how this fits into her narrative of her life. Like you said, you don't know if you'll ever be healed in the sense as if it goes away, but we've had scars since childhood. They just get incorporated into our bodies and they get incorporated into a story. I don't know anybody right now that can't point to a scar and say they don't have a story for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And it's
Most
a
people
vivid story usually too.
Vivid. And most people who are experiencing trauma, if I point to where it hurts, they can't tell me how it fits into the story of them yet. Doesn't fit. It's just a square peg in a round hole. And that anxiety of trying to find a place to put it becomes very painful, stressful, exhausting. And so as a dominant, my job is to understand that this is a psychic trauma. This is a soul wounding, right? And help them through compassion, tenderness, love, care, affection, to help them find a place to put this in their life, in their narrative, in their story, right? So they can better tell their story and live their story from this point.
I My note for that is trauma needs a story, right?
That's true.
And I like how you explained it as far as like, not fitting into your life. In my head, I thought of Deadpool, like where they're talking about the funny little jigsaw pieces. right? And we're
Mm-hmm.
just two
Mm-hmm.
perfectly whatever jigsaw pieces that just happen to fit. And like your crazy matches my crazy kind of thing or whatever. But I think about it, and I for me, I can already think of a couple things just off of the top of my head that I haven't accepted because how do they fit?
Mm-hmm.
And that I'm not saying I'll be able to figure out exactly where they'll fit overnight, but they're part of me, good, bad, or ugly.
Mm-hmm.
Acceptance and move forward is, but I don't think a lot of times we want to accept the bad into our life, so to say. And I struggle to even put good or bad. It's value neutral until we put a
Mm-hmm.
value to it. A new mantra that I've tried to adapt really a lot into my life is there's no failure, there's only
Mm-hmm.
feedback.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Love it.
Mm.
You know what? I once loaned a guy my favorite cup, right? And I had a lot of history with this cup. He kind of moved with me over the years, and I love this cup. And he borrowed it to take something home or something like that, and he broke it. He tried to put it back together. And when he brought it to me, I just couldn't love it in the same way, right? I could not accept it in this current configuration. Still useful, still functional, but the emotional connection wasn't there. And then I started looking at it and thinking about it from this point. If I went to the Salvation Army and bought that same cup, I would love it. It would be unique. It would be so like a one of a kind. It would be a one off. It was handcrafted, right? Someone took the time to put all the pieces back together, and I would think that that is amazing. The only difference between the two cups is I remember the configuration that it once was in, and I was attached to it. Most people experience trauma, and I used to be whole. I used to be good. I used to be amazing. I used to be happy. And now I'm broken. And while I'm still useful and still functional, I'm attached to who I used to be. Right? That's attachment that we find in Buddhism that we try to let go of. And so I had to keep that mug and hold on to it and learn to love it again. Right? But there's a lot of people like that too. Something happened, they broke, and it's hard to love them, it's hard to care for them. Right? But maybe I'm just attached to who they used to be and not who they are now. Maybe I can't learn to love them as they are right now. And a lot of people are scared because they don't believe that they're lovable anymore. Right?
Wow.
So yeah, this is very important when you come into the spiritual place because this directly transfers over into how we love the people that we're with. Our partners' bodies change.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? People get health issues. I remember doing a prostration class and this woman breaking down crying, and she said, I'm old. I can't kneel anymore. Who's going to love me? I can't crawl anymore. Who's going to love me? Right? I can't serve anymore. Who's going to love me? Right? That crisis of faith because she's so attached to who she used to be, as opposed to saying what she can do and who's going to love her for that.
Right.
Right? We are human beings, not human doings. And if we only derive a sense of value, which is what you said earlier, from what we do, then we're never truly loved for who we are.
Yeah. I love it. I'm all over this. I love that we're human beings like we need to be. And talking not that long ago about, long-term relationships and there are going to be struggles, the traditional marriage vows, sickness and health. I don't know them all, but there's going to be time, right? Where
Yeah.
it's not as easy. But I didn't think about the that internal aspect of, am I lovable now? It,
Mhm.
it, I got some I got some thoughts to think about. We have a question from the audience, and before it gets too
Sure.
far away from us, I'd like to go back. So we spoke on breaches of trust, and their question was, what what if it is a breach of trust in the dynamic? I speculated was that the question was when we were talking about repairing.
Mhm. Yeah, usually a breach of trust within the framework of dynamic happens often because we make implicit agreements with other people, or we have consensus based conversations where no one explicitly said what should happen, what shouldn't happen. And in that way, we either have two ways of going. We either say, hell, these dynamics are just shit. I don't want to do them anymore. Right? The BDSM is just a bunch of crap, which becomes a crisis of faith. Or you went outside of our agreements, you know what I'm saying? And you are a horrible human being, or you did this thing. You see how the division happens right there? But usually it's because there was a breakdown in communication, either how we communicated or how the person received it. When you look at memetics as it pertains to Susan Blackmore, you should read her work. She said, all memes, which are bite sized bits of culture, are subject to interpretation and variation. And so, anytime we do slave training or sub training, or we're working on disciplining or discipling our partner, we have to understand that everything I said as it leaves my mouth hits a filter, which is their consciousness, their awareness, their understanding, and is subject to interpretation and variation. And so, if I say we're monogamous, that hits another person's head and they go, yeah, yeah, okay. Right. But then they cheat. It's like, well, I thought monogamous meant as long as you didn't find out or blah, blah, blah. And we can be like, you're totally lying. It could be totally that. But we have to say it's subject to interpretation and variation. Monogamy means this to me. Are we operating under the understanding that monogamy means me and you, no other people? And if there's something changes, we sit down and have a conversation before it happens. And that gives me an opportunity to say whether we want to change the terms of the relationship to open, poly, etc., or that I want to walk away.
Hmm.
Right? We can't have implicit conversations and expect people to operate to the letter of the law. And oftentimes that's what's happening because our psyches are subject to interpretation and variation. So if I tell my sub, you need to do this, and they do that, well, part of it's me because I should have been very specific. I could have said, hey, repeat back to me what I said. Listening for the interpretation and variation. And if it matches what I said, boom, then we go from there. If it doesn't, then I need to change my languaging or do what I need to do to help them better understand what it is that I'm conveying.
Wow.
I hope
So
that's
I got a couple things to put in on this. A quote I drop whenever I can comes from Chris Williamson, I believe. Why it came from his show. I wasn't sure if it was him or his guest, but it's hidden expectations lead to, or unspoken expectations lead to hidden resentments. And I think that what we're talking about here, some breaches of trust are communication breakdowns. Like you said, I thought I was being monogamous. I think it's really important that we define words because, I mean, like, to be a little funny here, anybody that remembers Bill Clinton, oral sex wasn't sex, right? He was still being faithful to his wife because that was not sex.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us would probably disagree with that statement.
Mm-hmm.
We think that it is really important that we define the words, and each word's going to be, like you said, you're bringing in your cultural upbringing, your financial upbringing, all of that's all the social status that comes into who you are as an individual. When one
Mm-hmm.
person hears trust, they may think this, and another person will think something completely different. I'm gonna final and round off this thought with a SpongeBob quote. I love it, right? SpongeBob says, "What if I break your trust someday?" Patrick says, "Trusting you is my decision, and proving me wrong is your choice." And
Mm-hmm.
I was thankful that I had a child and I watched SpongeBob that day because that has stuck with me for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I
I
think,
really believe that children's stories are the repository of all human wisdom.
mm,
You know, Einstein said you haven't mastered your theory until you can explain it to a 10-year-old. Right? And that's really what we're talking about. That's why when I wrote my book, The Enzo, A Philosophy of Submission, by the way, you can get it on Amazon. I wrote it in parable, right? I wrote it as a parable, a bunch of parables that even from a sub to a dominant to a little to X, Y, and Z can read the brief parables involved and get the wisdom that they're looking for and be able to sit there and digest it in this tiny bite-sized little thing. It's written so that even a child could understand it if they were to read it, right? And so for me, trying to explain the nature of surrender and the nature of submission, not the act of surrender, not the act of submission, not the act of obedience, but the subtleness of devotion, that's hugely different. And to try and get people to understand those narratives is really important because I'd rather this be an act of devotion than, I'm sorry, someone being in devotion than an act of obedience. You see the difference I'm talking about?
mhm. I mean, I think there's a big difference between being obedient, a massive difference. Most people can be obedient, especially when they need to. Um,
Mhm.
but to be devoted, that I think that comes more from a selfless space, and that is
Mhm.
more. When I think of obedience, it, it can vary, but I tell someone what to do, they listen. That's obedience. I cannot tell somebody to be devoted to me.
Mhm. Yeah. It's really the B and the D in BDSM. I always say BDSM means breathe deeply, slowly, and meaningfully. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
that's always the mantra: breathe deeply, slowly, and meaningfully. But to me, when I talk to subs, it's like the B and the D is belief, and the other one is devotion. The B and the D is belief and devotion. Now there's the S and the M that I won't get into now. But if you can't believe in what we're building, if you can't believe in me, if you can't believe in what we're creating, it'll never come to fruition.
Mm.
And if you're not devoted to bringing it into fruition, it'll never happen. Because what we're building, this relationship, there's no lumber, there's no timber, there's no construction, there are no You know what I mean? There's no physical narrative to it. If you can't see it, right, and then you believe it's not there, then it will never be there. It only exists because you believe in it. And most relationships fall apart when they stop believing in it.
Wow. My head's spinning over here. I appreciate it. I mean, just personal notes, not counting video notes. I think I'm up to 4 pages already. Thank you.
No
So,
problem.
but I'd like to get back to some of the questions and get back more onto the spiritual topic. Once again, I see
We were just spiritual.
I know, but more in that linear path that I thought, right? So my next question would be, how can power dynamics in BDSM align with spiritual concepts?
Well, first thing that they have to understand is what power is. You know, like, so let me ask you a question. How do you define power?
Oof. I mean, I want to be like facetious and say a light switch, right?
You know what I mean?
Yeah. That power's influence. Power is the ability to influence things and people around you with your will.
Okay. So now, what character in what spiritual guide did not wield that type of power? You see what I'm saying? They all use the same type of power, right? You go from Jesus to Buddha, you know what I mean? They had the ability to influence people in a way that was deeply meaningful and profound.
Mm-hmm.
So as a Dom, this person has a desire to be a beneficial influence on a person who is willing to be influenced in a way that's mutually beneficial, right? It's transformative and profound, right? So that's how we take it out of, I want control, because that's how most people define it. Power is control. No, control is control. Power is the ability to act in accordance with one's will and or desire. And what makes it not a abuse of power is the fact that that person consents to it. Right? So exactly what you're saying. I can act in accordance with my will and or my desire. My desire is to be a beneficial influence over you, a transformative presence, someone who's going to uplift you, you know what I mean, and take you to that next stage of development that is not only beneficial for the relationship, but it's going to take you to the next level, right? Another thing that we can talk about when you use the acronym BDSM is people say discipline, but really what it meant originally was to disciple a person. It wasn't about disciplining, it was about discipling. This person is a follower of you. They're learning from you. They're being trained by you. Right? You're transforming them. You're educating them. You're discipling them. Again, disciples is something that you see often in religious contexts. But we've taken that out and we've made it discipline. I have to spank you. I have to correct your behavior. I have to do this, that, and the other. As opposed to I'm using a somatic method of ingraining this lesson into your body. Right? Two different ways of looking at the same act. Thoughts or feelings?
Oh boy, my head's so spinning on thoughts. I think that I think it's interesting that I personally never heard that it was originally disciple. I actually like that because just like how you framed it, it is a lot about leadership and follower. And BDSM as an acronym typically misses that. I personally, at least from my perspective, the whole mentorship, the whole influence inside of the BDSM subculture is big. We all want to be educators. We all want to be presenters. We all want to share our experience and our knowledge with people that are eager to get it. I mean, look at us here sitting on this podcast, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I might have to start using that a little bit more because it fits more with my flavor of what BDSM is. I've actually
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, I've almost renounced the BDSM community. If you heard me earlier, I stumbled on my words and I don't often, occasionally, but it's because I I feel on an island. I'm not part of the BDSM community. I'm a BDSM practitioner, but I do have a BDSM family, and that is my community.
Mm-hmm.
All of life, that's not my community. That's the BDSM subculture as a whole. They might not have the same views or thoughts on authority or how we do this. There is no one right way, and that's okay. But I think that sometimes we replace the word with community and we say the BDSM community, but I think the proper term is it's, in my opinion, and I don't know if it is proper, but it's more of a subculture. There are communities, there's the leather communities, there's local communities, but to connect everybody that is a BDSM practitioner under one umbrella, I think that's pretty ambitious. Depending on how you define community, I suppose.
I mean, a group of people that talk to each other is a community. And it's not a community because people don't talk to each other. So, yeah, you're right. But at the end of the day, it's what Michel Foucault called a heterotopic space, a space within a place that shapes behavior and ways of being. So, um, so it's really important to realize that there's a difference between a heterotopic space and a community,
Mm.
right? So, uh, do with that with you what you will, you know what I mean? Because I don't want to get into this kind of debate about what that is. If you want to read more about that too, you can look at the Chinese word jiang hu, which means the other side of the river, and gives you a perfect example of an existential example of what the community that we exist in is, which is another version of a heterotopic space. So that being said, I hope that people understand that this isn't the community isn't the totality of what we do. The relationships that we create within this framework is. My job is to bring my family and build it around these principles that have inspired me and to help them grow and develop within the framework that we've created. And it definitely resembles that which what we call a BDSM community. It is not the BDSM community, but it does resemble it. And I'll give you another example too. There are always going to be people on the inside, and there's always going to be people on the outside. And the people who are inside the village all believe the same thing, right? The people on the outside village are usually your wise women, your shaman, your hermits, right? Your eclectics, your eccentrics. And that's who I am. I'm that weird guy at the end of the road that when you don't know something or you want to find something out that you can't find out in your village, you hike out to me. You ask me a couple questions, and I help get you on the path, right?
Mm.
But then you leave me here, and then you go back to your community or your village or your hut, right? And you have what you, oh, look what I discovered, right? And I get to be out here alone with a little community I created, my little wife and kids or whatever it is. And I'm happy like that. I'm very happy just being this old wise guy that sits in a chair on top of a mountain watching the who's in Whoville.
I love it. It goes back into just that whole like self-acceptance. And you know, I just turned 40 this year, and
Oh my
my
God, you're a
girl,
baby.
yeah, I know, my girl was like, because I've you know, over the last 6 months, you know, I've questioned a lot of things. I've reevaluated and reflected on a lot of my life, and it's like, this is where 40 years got me. Where does the next 40? And you know, she just kept telling me, she's like, it's because you're turning 40, like you're starting to feel old or something. And I am actually at the end of a dead end road in the middle of nowhere. So I'm pretty already on my way to be that old wise man at the end of the road, and I'm okay with that. And but like you said, at the end of the road is the family, the people that I truly want to surround myself with. And that's not to say that I don't want to occasionally go and visit the village and hang out, you know, and share
And know that they're
stories.
gonna look at you like a weirdo.
And that's okay. That's okay. Um, Nonetheless, but yeah, I, I can go way off topic on that one. So
Okay,
I'll
but
try to
this is a
get
part of the
back.
spiritual. This is a part of the spiritual conversation because at the end of the day, even the weirdos have a weirdo, right? And for
Mm,
me, it's too hard to perform conformity than it is to be myself. And so, even within the framework of the outcast, even within the framework of this, I am still the weirdo amongst the weirdos. And so, and that's okay. And yeah, I get a little cabin fever and I need to go down and scare the villagers, you know what I mean? Every now and then, you know, and then I go back and I feel a little rewarded. I got some, you know, some face time, no matter what it is. And I'm good for a little while longer. But most people are not the star of their own movie.
mm.
They're sitting there playing a part-time role in someone else's story. My job is to cast my story with fucking stars, with people who are going to push me and make my life better. And they're not here because I made them be here. They're here because this is the role that they want to play. This is their starring role. This is their opportunity. They've been bit players in other people's fucking scripts, right? This is where this is a lifetime role, and this is a long-term running opera. This is where you get to shine. You spend 20, 30, 40 years in someone else's shadow. Step up and be the person I know you are. Action. Right? So I'm not going to sit here and be like, well, you have to and you have to. I'm not your coach. I'm your co-star. Play your role. You know your role. Play your part. Do your thing. Right? That's what it's about. And if I have a community floating about, they're like, oh, Orpheus is a jerk because look how he talks to. You don't know her. You don't know me. You're not a part of the story. You're still projecting onto us. You feel what I'm saying? So for me, I have a resentment with community too, right? Because at the end of the day, I can go back there and see my 35-year relationship, my 28-year relationship, my two 15-year relationships, right? I'm just ending a 6-year relationship. And in the community, a long-term relationship is like 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Coach me
If
on
that.
what? Yeah, coach me on what? Commune with me about what?
Mm.
Right? This is a layer of what when we start talking about the spiritual narrative, we're talking about the intangibles. The relationship becomes a part of that spiritual narrative because you can't touch it. Right? You can't grab it. It's like picking up water with a net. Right? And so if the relationship isn't the cauldron by which you work your magic, right? Then you have nothing. I'll pause. You got
Oh,
me
I
going.
love it. No. So we did talk about limiting this an hour and a half. So we got about 20 minutes, and I got at least one really big question and maybe one smaller question we'll try to get through. So the smaller question, or at least I think is potentially the smaller question, is How do you create sacred space during your BDSM practices, and what elements contribute to that atmosphere?
Use an acronym called space. It's not acronym. It's a little nomenclature I use: space, place, time, sacrifice. Every ritual can have anything else, but they have to have those four qualities: space, place, time, and sacrifice. Right? We go to a church on Christmas, right? So you got your place and you got your time, right? They've created a space for the ritual to happen, and everyone who is there is sacrificing something, whether it is a dollar amount out of their pocket, whether it is time and effort, whether it's gas, whether it is the headache of arguing with your family, whether it is something. Everyone has sacrificed to be in that space. And so when we think about just sitting down to dinner is sacred, because the effort that my wife put in to make that meal, because the effort that my husband made to get off of work, drive home, take a shower, decompress, and sit at the table, or my kids will make washing the dishes. Everyone has sacrificed to have this moment together. And oftentimes that goes overlooked and underappreciated. To have a offering or sacrifice put at the altar of your ritual and it be unacknowledged hurts deeply, right? And many subs, specifically subs, feel underappreciated, underacknowledged. They had to get dressed and drive down there and go to the club and dress up and put the thing and then stand there and let you do your thing and put their body and their mind and their hormones and their psyche all in the line. And then we don't even cuddle. Or aftercare becomes this huge thing. Right? So sacred space is really about acknowledging the sacrifice in this place, in this space, at this time. And that is the major contributor of creating sacred space.
I think you hit on something, and I'm going to put it in my words. I think that some of it is people want to be seen as themselves, right? And sometimes within the busyness of the world, like, I'm going to use dinner. Like, we sit down at dinner and we pick up our phones and we're not really present. It's easy for an S type that's spent time cooking that dinner to not be seen, right? And even for me to not see that behavior, that service. So for going back to eating, I try to make eating more of, not necessarily sacred space, but that a time that is more for the relationship, where it is a little bit slower down and we can acknowledge each other and the roles to each other.
That's really what it's about. It's acknowledging. Right? Because let's say we both go in on this podcast. I'm 50-50 and they give me an award and I look out and see you out there. And I get, hey, I see you. You'd be like, no, acknowledge the fact that I did something. You know what I mean? Acknowledge me.
Yeah.
You have to acknowledge the sacrifice. Being seen is base. That's basic. You see the help, seen and not heard. Right? That's over. That's for the vanillas. That's for the newbies. That's for the kids that are just coming on. Seeing is the most minimal thing that you can do. Hearing them is the next most minimal, but acknowledging what their contribution is and how difficult it was. And really stepping in and feeling the fact that, and let me just be clear, after getting up at about 6 a.m. and driving an hour to work and then working 8 to 9 to 10 hours, my wife will probably come home, find something to do, and then make food. And if I just treat her like, oh, I see you, hey, that sucks. Or if I just hear her say how horrible it was today, that sucks. You go in there and you acknowledge the fact that, you know what, I know you're tired. And I know and this freaking food is wonderful. Thank you. I really appreciate you going through this whole ritual of showing your care for me by turning that fire on, putting those pots down there, doing this thing, and making this amazing meal. I appreciate it. Right? My wife had we had a conversation one time, and she said, who am I to you? I said, you're my wife, my sub, my slave. And she's like, I said, who am I to you? She said, my God, because I couldn't worship at the feet of anything less. Remember that. She put me on notice that you have to be at the highest level for me to serve you. Shorting yourself is shorting me. Not living up to your potential is not living up to the terms and agreements of this relationship. I expect more from you. I fucking eat that shit up. I love it. And we're a highly competitive couple, right? And so for me to just get off of my ass and go in there and love her up and appreciate her and put my arms around her and do all those things makes her feel her sacrifice worth it. To show that she's worthy, her sacrifice is worthy. Hell, Cain killed Abel when when God said his sacrifice wasn't worthy. How's your feelings? Let's see. I can't read your expressions.
I got Asperger's, so my social cues and social normities are out there. A lot of thoughts, and honestly, I need to sit on them, partly, and then partly, we got about 13 minutes left.
So all right, we got to do this other thing. All right, let's do these questions.
I got one more, just kind of a doozy of a one. So
let's do it.
Hopefully 13 minutes is enough. Have you seen BDSM serve as a tool for personal transformation or healing? If so, can you share some examples?
BDSM or just kink as a whole?
However you'd like to answer it.
Okay. In 13 minutes, let's go BDSM. Bondage is a healing modality because we understand that swaddling children helps them feel more comfortable, more grounded, sleep better. It also affects their hormones and it helps them produce more of the love hormone, which I believe is serotonin, in their body. And bondage, in the one study I saw, does the exact same thing. Right? But let's just go into a spiritual or psychosomatic narrative. I always say nobody likes bondage. And what I mean by that is financially, psychologically, etc. What they want to do is be the focus of a process, right? And so in doing that, they get to feel a sense of significance that most people don't get to experience on a regular basis, right? And significance is important. Some people only get to feel significance once a year, and that once a year is called their birthday. Human beings all over the world know the importance of significance. That's why everybody celebrates their date of their birth, right? So when they get to be the sole focus, they feel worthy, they feel valuable, they feel cared for, they feel dropped in. And some people have never experienced that in their entire life. And so having that interaction with a guardian figure can transform them in more than just the physical way. Right? So discipling, let's not use discipline, let's use discipling. The idea that we can step into a relationship where someone is investing in you investing a knowledge, a wisdom, a care, a concern, that's guiding you through life for many people is huge. So many people are born without the type of loving, caring authority figures that they kind of just been winging it their entire life. And so when you can sit down with someone and disciple them, help teach them, correct them, show them the right way, invest in their future, invest in who they are as human beings, right? That in and of itself is transformative because we can see the difference between when children have someone who's invested in them and those who don't have people who invest in them, right? So when we move into bondage discipline, so sadism and masochism, I want to change this to surrender, right? And I don't like to use S&M in this term because the terms are actually not accurate. But let's just say it's surrender. When you step into surrender, it helps people understand the importance of letting go. Surrender is comprised of two things, letting go and not holding on, right? And this is really important because there's many things that we need to let go of that are hurting us. And there's many things that we're holding on to that are no longer serving us. And all of those are preventing us from being our most authentic self. So when we go through this process of surrender, where we really step into it, we really go into this place of, all I need to do is be present with you. That's huge. So many people are weighed down by the things that they carry. And I'll give you another example. I always use this colloquially. How is baggage made? Do you know how baggage is made, by the way? Mm-hmm. When people say baggage, you're carrying baggage. Okay, sure. I'll throw it out there. So let's say I have an argument with you and I'm like, you know what? That's it. I'm leaving. I'm putting this conversation down. I can't do it anymore. And I walk away and I let go of the conversation by holding on to the feelings and emotions.
Ooh. Ooh,
so I let go of the conversation, but I'm holding on to the feelings. And if the body keeps the score, you're carrying around how many emotions from conversations that you let go of years ago, right? And that's baggage. So we have to not only let go, but we have to stop holding on, right? That's absolutely important. Okay. And then let's do M, which is, I usually use mortification as opposed to masochism. Mortification is always a method of transformation because we see people self-flagellating around the world where they beat themselves to attain an altered state of being. We see people piercing their bodies. The modern primitive movement is a kind of modern day example of people mortifying their flesh in order to attain an altered state of being without drugs or alcohol. Where the adrenaline, the hormones, the things that the body produces opens up the mind and body and spirit and even soul in a different way. And so sessions of mortification with the intention of transformation can open people up to new dynamics, can help them let go of some of the baggage that they keep in their body, right? In the same way a massage can help you work through some of the things that you're holding in there, a flogging, a spanking, right? A suspension, the act of being weightless, a spanking can shake something loose that's been pent up in the body for so long. So again, when we treat it as mortification and not masochism, we can achieve a different outcome.
You've definitely helped me start to look at words a little bit differently, at least a few of them.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
So I kind of fibbed. I have two final questions. One's an easy layup. But
well, I gotta check out. I can only take one.
All right. Well, one is to your benefit, but what advice or resources would you offer someone that's looking to explore more spiritual aspects in their BDSM
My
practices?
book, The Enzo.
And
And you can
I
get the
did share a
Enzo
link for it, but
philosophy
I
of
will reshare a
submission.
link.
The Enzo philosophy of submission on Amazon, or you can go to orpheusblack.com and get it. Honestly, I don't. I know most of the people who wrote books, and I'm more of a fan of authors, not books. And so, oftentimes, the people that I know who wrote books don't have relationships that reflect mine. And so, the things that I read are often the greats, the Upanishads. Um, I love Paulina Renge's The Story of O. I love things that help me understand the full scope of what is there and what can be. Um, those are the type of things that really help me. I would have to go into books on magic too. I love anything like that. There's a feminist guide to magic. It's a really hard book to find, but really helped me understand ritual better. So, other than my book, those are some of the things that I enjoy.
Well, see, it worked out. The last two questions were almost the same one because the last question was, do you have any books that are out? Do you have any classes coming up? Do you have any shameless
Yeah.
plugs?
Any shameless plug, orpheusblack.com. I do one-on-one coaching. We also have a number of podcast replays that we sell to people. We also have a number of retreats coming up for next year. And, give us a call. You can always sign up for a 30-minute free consultation with me. And as you can see, I like to talk, so you can ask me whatever you want. And my job is to try and get you to sign up. So expect that plug. But other than that, go to orpheusblack.com and you'll find everything that you're looking for. Also, follow me on Orpheus Black, all social media.
Awesome. I cannot say how much I appreciate your time, your thoughts, your experience, the thoughts that you provoked.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing more of this podcast and watching more of your show.
Awesome. Well, you have a great night, and I hope everyone else does. Thank you for tuning in.